While the United Kingdom remains a kingdom even to this day, the position of monarch has become essentially ceremonial, with real power firmly in the grasp of Parliament. But when did this transition happen, and how did the kings let Parliament get away with it? Well, this struggle for power has been going on for quite some time, way before the United Kingdom became united. I'm not really sure it's united now, so sorry about that. We need to go all the way back to the 13th century. England was its own thing back then, and like most medieval kingdoms at the time, it was in a constant power struggle between the king and his vassals. Unsurprisingly, this parliamentary mess was started by King John, famous for, among other things, almost selling England out to Islam. When his barons rebelled and got him to sign the Magna Carta in 1215, they demanded permanent representation in a great council, which had the right to reject any new taxes proposed by the king. Now, John tried to backtrack and wage war on the barons, but he died just a year later, and his 9-year-old son Henry III, well, he had little choice in the matter. So pretty much since the 13th century, the kings of England had to go through this great council to raise any meaningful amounts of money. The first time the council was referred to as a parliament was in 1236, when the now grown-up Henry tried to fund his wedding to Eleanor of Provence, who was just 12 years old at the time, but that's a minor detail. Now, this original parliament only got together at the request of the king, and its members were either feudal or ecclesiastical lords. However, Henry soon realized that these weren't the only people with money in England. Some among the merchants and the knights could be equally, if not more, rich. Henry started inviting such commoners in 1254, which obviously wasn't taken too well by the barons. They rose up in rebellion not long after, and like with King John, they eventually sat Henry down and had him sign the provisions of Oxford. The commoners could stay, but the king's advisors would be elected by the barons. And crucially, Parliament would now meet 3 times per year, rather than only when the king felt like it. Over the next century, as the kings of England duked it out with France during the 100 Years' War, they had to earn Parliament's favor to secure funds for their campaigns. The barons were happy to just be left to their own devices, like abusing their serfs. But the commoners actually wanted to see, change. As an act of protest in 1341, the commoners assembled in a separate building from the barons, and that's how the House of Commons was born. Before long, the commons were demanding rights like veto power over royal expenditures, the ability to draft new laws, and, dare I say it, fair taxation. In 1397, King Richard II decided to punish these treasonous demands and tried to rein Parliament in, which, as always, backfired spectacularly. This time around, Parliament had the king deposed and gave the crown to his cousin. Then, for the next 200 years, the powers of Parliament were respected, more or less, until we get to Charles I. He too tried to raise taxes without consent, and after a brief civil war, as you do, Parliament put him on trial for treason. The king argued that he couldn't commit treason against himself. He was the king, after all. And that's when Parliament got the brilliant idea of separating the idea of king and country. Charles I was judged a traitor not to himself, but to England, and he was executed. Unfortunately, Charles's son, James II, had similar ideas about his divine right to rule, though for him, Parliament figured out an extra spicy solution. They collaborated with his daughter Mary and her husband William, the leader of the Dutch Republic, to organize a massive invasion of England, the last such invasion to be successful. Parliament deposed James and gave the crown to William and Mary simultaneously, in exchange for signing the Bill of Rights, which conclusively established Parliament's power over the king. Eventually, the English Parliament voted to merge with the Scottish one, forming the Kingdom of Great Britain, and then 100 years later, they also added Ireland into the mix to form the United Kingdom we all know and love.